one of the things that makes these ideas so exciting to me is how they are so directly in contradiction to these sort of like shame-based models that we experience, particularly out of Christianity, but out of a lot of religions. And I guess I'm curious about how shame and guilt sort of factor into or contradict the self-compassion model.
Yeah, well, I mean, shame and guilt are normal human emotions for one. So that's the thing too, is like with self-compassion and any self-help journey or healing journey someone's on, like we can almost get caught up in this idea of destroying all the other unpleasant feelings. It's like, well, for me to
Mm-hmm.
be well means I don't feel shame and guilt. Like it's just this really healthy relationship. It's like, no, you're supposed to feel shame. There's an appropriate place for it. You're supposed to feel guilt. Like these are signals to alert you to like, hey, what's up? Let's check in. Now, when it's out of control and it's just like your home base, that lets you know, like, I think something's a bit off. I think maybe this
Yeah, when
isn't
it's been
so
like
wise.
weaponized against you and you develop
Yeah,
like a really unhealthy relationship with it.
exactly. So shame is going to be there, and self compassion is the way to help move you through the shame that is there. So obviously, trauma, religious stuff, like that's the main tool is, you know, don't do anything wrong. You're going to die forever and God hates you and, all the worst possible things. But yeah, self-compassion's there to say, one, you're not doing anything wrong. Like we can't fail at life, to be clear. Like even to not survive just means okay, and life is over. So there's no like we have to remind ourselves we can't fail at this. We can
Mm.
struggle, but like you can't fail the world. The world can fail you, but you can't fail the world because you weren't built to carry the world. Like you're just not the deciding factor. And so I think self-compassion is so important coming from religion too, because it's that counter message of you are good enough as you are, not because, oh, I see something so special in you and you've earned it and you've proven that you're great. It's like, no, you exist as a human being in this world who suffers and struggles and strives like everyone else. You are qualified. Like you are born, therefore you've met those are the prerequisites. So self-compassion just has to keep being used to remind someone that, oh, hey, you're not broken, you're not wrong. Your struggling is a result of you trying to be well, for one,
Mm-hmm.
and even like, I mean, everyone with religion can have their own story of what it did to them, what that experience was like. But I think people can leave religion and then be so mad at themselves for the beliefs they held. Like ones that were like, but I was like all in, like they just feel like such bad people that they believed all these things that they realize are harmful. And it's like, oh, but even the part of you that believed all that, like you were trying so hard to be okay. Like what a beautiful thing that at that point in your life, that's what made the most sense to keep your world together.
Mm.
Like to go against those beliefs at any other stage would have felt like too much cognitive dissonance for you to maybe handle. So like you had to do what you had to do. And so I think kind of removing that shame too of like the part people played for the ones that did really adopt those beliefs and now are questioning like, holy fuck, like if I like I can't believe I got caught up in that. It's like you were trying so hard, and just to have so much love for yourself, because all of us are trying to be well, and we have these different things we turn to try and help us make sense of the world and feel at peace, and that maybe we'll be loved. And if we came from a place where we don't know what love is like, and there's this other religion or community or deity that's like, I've got a path, even if it's a super fucked up path, like that's really appealing.
Yeah, deeply
Like,
tempting.
yeah, like, okay, I can get it. Like that's not the dumb part of you or the what's wrong with you. It's just like, okay, that's what spoke to you. That's what you needed. You were moving towards what you needed. So my hope is that people realize like to have compassion for every little part. Because sometimes we
Mm.
want to have compassion for the good parts of ourselves, but we're like, but that other one,
That's
that's the
what I
part.
want to reward.
Yeah, the other part let me down. I don't want to have compassion for that other weak part of me or something. It's like, no, 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 that part is trying so hard to be okay, you know? But people just have a hard time wanting to see that because they demonize themselves. So yeah, I just think always bring self-compassion, as the antidote along the journey of the shame.
I like that notion of it as an antidote. I
Mhm.
struggled through 4 semesters of Latin in college because I'm an idiot who didn't realize he lived in Texas. Uh, but I like being reminded that the root of that word compassion is just about being with the pain. Right?
Yes.
Like, it's not just the nice thing that you do for the nice parts of yourself. You actually go around looking for the issues. And even if those
Mhm.
issues are small, like
Mhm.
our white blood cells don't swim around our bloodstream looking for like big infections. They're just looking for any foreign body to attack. So they bring like repair and nurturance to the areas that need them, regardless of if it's like a big problem or a little problem or a
Mhm.
problem you caused yourself or a problem that you deserve or any of those ideas.
Mhm. I That's such a great example because it's like compassion is there to tend to the suffering. That's it. There's not a hierarchy. There's not some parts you deserve it, some parts of you don't. It's just like, yep, this is what we do. Something struggling. Cool. I'm going to step in because you need to be held right now. You need to be supported. You need to be seen, whatever. And people with self compassion, I know I can be the same way too when I practice it, is that we're like, yeah, I'm doing good. I'm being compassionate. But the second we start feeling like really bad about ourselves, we're like, well, fuck self compassion. We've entered the darkness and there's no place for you here. It's like, no, 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 no. That's where it comes
That's
to,
where it's
you
supposed
know?
to be. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's just remembering like it doesn't abandon us. Like,
Mm.
and it's not supposed to fix us. Like I think of that with when people say like I'm bad at meditating. It's like, what do you mean? Like, well, my mind
Yeah.
wanders. It's like I okay, and it's like that you can't be bad at. So you meditated, cool, you succeeded. There's this idea of like, but I'm supposed to have a clear mind, and it only counts if like there's no suffering, there's no thoughts in my head, and it's like no, it didn't promise that. So same with self compassion. It's not this like this strategy that you just like Hail Mary at yourself of like, fuck, we feel really bad. Okay, I'm going to do self compassion and I'm going to feel better, right? It's like, well, not necessarily because some stuff doesn't get to just be fixed. We can't compassion away human nature,
Mm.
like there's suffering. It's hard to be a person. We're going to keep encountering it over and over again. And so we have to see compassion as this companion we bring with us that doesn't have any other agenda than I'm going to be with you in this moment, not I'm going to be with you and you're going to respond this way and then life's going to look this way and da, da, da. Okay, cool. No, it's just going to be there. It doesn't abandon you. I think that's the important part is there's a lot of self-abandonment that happens
Mm.
for all of us, like we don't like to look at parts of ourselves. So we're like, well, fuck you. All right, let's just go cry in a corner and, but self-compassion is that presence that's like, I, I will not leave you. It doesn't matter what you do because there's no test here. Like, I'm not here because you earned it. I'm here because you're suffering. That's what my call is. When I see suffering, I show up. And so just kind of remembering like you have to keep letting it be there with you. It's supposed to be a presence. It's not going to just like make you cheery and happy all the time. Sometimes it will make you feel better pretty quickly, which is amazing. But it's a thing that you keep providing as this presence for yourself because over time you start to realize like, oh, I'm seen and I'm held in this world. And that's just like a state you get to know. It's like if you go to a party or something and maybe you don't know anyone, but you have that like one friend, right? Maybe they're across the room. And it's like you have those moments where you look up and make eye contact. You're like, all right, I'm good. I'm good. It's like maybe you feel uncomfortable the whole rest of the time, but when you remember they're there, or y'all can like laugh at something secretly that you hear someone else say, like it's so grounding because you're like, yeah, I'm uncomfortable in this moment still. I still don't like any of these other people, but I know I'm not alone and that someone's got my back. And it's just that gentle presence. So same thing with self-compassion. It's like having this companion basically that's with us all the time. So even in difficult moments, we're like, oh, but yeah, I haven't been abandoned. I'm not alone. Like there's a way for me to be tended to and cared for no matter what's going on.
Yeah, so it really is a way of getting away from that sort of magical thinking of if I do this, then
Hmm.
everything will be better, and there's some sort of
Yeah,
silver bullet. And I came to my therapist because I wanted to be fixed. This model says like you're not broken. You might be a little bit
exactly.
stuck, Uh,
Mhm.
and we might not be able to really change that today, but we can offer some support. We can offer some nurturance and some kindness.
Mhm.
And if that doesn't, quote, fix things, it's going to make it better, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And because we can't we can't outrun human suffering. The only way to stop suffering as a human is to not be alive anymore as a like this is the only way it works. Otherwise you are alive. We're going to keep having these issues that come up, struggles. And so we need something that's there with us all the time, not just what's the thing so I can like get over this pain and be great. It's like we're not trying to be great. There's nowhere we're not trying to ascend up to something, you
Mm.
know? Like so it's we just need to have something, some resource where it helps us along this journey that will have continuous struggles.
Yeah. Well, is there a particular population, a particular type of client, a particular type of person that benefits from some of these philosophies or some of these techniques?
I'd say everyone because this
Sure.
is, about the internal relationship. So everyone benefits from it, but then especially people who are highly self-critical or,
Mm-hmm.
feel shame really frequently. So, and of course, that's the hardest to do self-compassion. So, and the thing for those people too is when when people start practicing self-compassion, it's easy to get discouraged because, like you said before, it's just like, well, I'm not believing it or it doesn't feel right. We resist it a lot. And so we can assume like it doesn't work or I'm not
Mm,
deserving of it or else wouldn't I be open to it if I actually deserved it? But the more self-critical we are, it just means we have to be patient and gentle with ourselves when practicing self-compassion because love will start being a trigger for fear. So, and a lot
mm,
of people, if there's trauma too, or a religion where you're like, I was fully accepted and loved, and but love actually looked like a lot of abuse. Like it's actually pretty terrifying then when you try to turn that gentleness and kindness and love towards yourself. Because even though, as we talk about, it's like, no, that sounds like that'd be great, right? But it's like, oh no, if the brain has started to distrust love and what it looks like, then it's going to distrust it when it's coming from you as well. And so for those people, it's just a matter of being really patient and really gentle with it, kind of microdosing your self compassion, because your safety mechanism inside is going to be like, no, get away because love is bad. We can't trust it. And so you kind of have to work on building that relationship with yourself of like, I might be a safe person you can trust. I know you haven't been able to trust anyone else and there's been abuse or you felt abandoned or, but I'm still going to be here. So I think that's just really want to emphasize that because so many times people want to practice self-compassion, but
mhm.
then it feels bad because they're just like, oh, it feels this is icky. And a lot of pain comes up for people too because the first time they really like provide that for themselves and get this sense of like, oh my gosh, I'm cared for, it floods them with all the reminders of how much they haven't felt cared for.
Sure,
They
yeah.
they they remember all this like time lost, and they're just like, oh my gosh, like it's bringing it into clear view. I have felt unloved forever, maybe, and so it's really kind of scary. Um, but that's why kind of taking it slow and being patient with it, and not letting the fact that it's so foreign and a little uncomfortable trick you into thinking, oh, then it's bad for me.
Right. Yeah, I really like Christopher Germer's idea of backdraft here.
Yes, yeah,
The
yeah.
notion that you have like a burning building that has like no more oxygen left in the room, and you
Mhm,
go in to rush to like save the fire or to put the fire out, and as you
mhm,
open the door, all of a sudden it's flooded with like your focus and attention, and these things that you've been maybe avoiding thinking about have
mhm.
like this burst of oxygen or attention, and it can kind of blow back on you a little bit.
Yeah, for sure, and that terrifies people because 'cause they're like, "Okay, well, I don't love myself and that hurts. I tried to love myself and that fucking hurts too. Okay, so I'm hopeless." And it's like, "Oh,
Yeah,
no,
so
no, it
just
was"
everything hurts.
Yeah, it's like, "No, it was just a lot. Don't worry. It's just you need time to kinda adjust and keep practicing it." And so, yeah, that's what I always wanna, like, emphasize is that it can feel difficult, a little bit, especially if you've had an environment you've grown up in or any trauma that's kind of taught you that to be cared for isn't safe.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know we don't have the opportunity to offer like a full therapy session here on the podcast, but
Mhm.
are there any ideas you'd like to impress upon the audience about maybe the usefulness or a healthy relationship with shame, or the
Mhm.
self-esteem model, and how this like evaluativeness or this self-judgment can be useful and unuseful? What could you
Mhm.
say about all that?
Yeah, with the shame, like when we feel it, it's fine to be curious about it because sometimes shame does let us know, hey, you're acting against your values. And it's like,
Mm,
all right, thank you for the heads up. You know, appreciate that. But to stay in that place, it yeah, doesn't serve you at all because there's always a hierarchy. You're either on top or bottom, or but it's like you don't get to ever be grounded if you're like proving yourself like, oh, good, I'm finally a good person. Now I did it. It's like, okay,
mhm.
until what the next thing that now you're afraid you've fallen from grace. And, so it's so up and down if you keep trying to aspire to some ideal self, some level of perfection, so it's an exhausting ride if you keep using the like my good, bad, that self-esteem shame model. Like it just I don't know. It's exhausting. Like, yeah, it'll motivate you
Yeah.
sometimes. You'll do stuff. I'm not saying that we don't get shit done when we're mad at ourselves. Like, it can work, but it's just not going to be the sustainable path. And also, it's like it's not your fault too that you feel shame. I just like that being a
Mm.
reminder. Like, it's not your fault. Who you are is not your fault. It's your responsibility to figure out what am I going to do with this. But it's not your fault at any point for these different ways that you suffer.
I like that distinction between like fault and responsibility.
Mm.
And, as Gus Fring said, I don't find fear to be an effective motivator. Like that
Mhm.
beating yourself into
Yeah.
submission just doesn't get it. Uh,
Mhm.
but when we're talking about shame, we're talking about, loving ourselves. How does that show up in our romantic relationships, for instance?
Yeah, well, I think when we have so much shame, like what shame needs to survive is a lot of secrecy, right? And like darkness and defensiveness and ego stories and all of that. And so to to have compassion for ourselves and kind of try and release some of that shame means we can actually show up in a relationship, right? If I'm
Mm,
ashamed of all the parts of who I am, then I'm going to be performing in a relationship or convincing someone to love me, or quick to defensiveness if a partner says just the slightest thing that hits that deep nerve where I'm like, well, I hate that part of myself. Now they said this, we freak out because it's just been buried so deep. Versus if we have that compassion for like, oh, what if this struggle of mine isn't my failing? What if this is just
mm.
an aspect of what it's like to be me right now? What if this is just my humanity, not my dysfunction or failing? What would it look like if this just got to exist? Then we get to actually communicate with our partners, right? We get to know what we are needing, what we're feeling. We get to express
Instead of
that stuff.
covering up those deficits or those places that are hard.
Yeah, and we know when we're hurting too, and can actually request that from a partner, right? If I have a lot of shame around something, and then I'm triggered, it's easy for me to be like, "What I need is for you to fuck off and never talk to me." It's like, but what if I didn't have shame there and I knew what I needed was something a little bit different, right? So the more we can sit with ourselves, have that compassion, we just get more in tune with those needs. We can express that to our partner, and it's healthier for both people because we're coming
Mm.
from that more authentic state of meeting each other's needs versus meeting each other's defensive reactions to shame protection,
Yeah, yeah, meeting each other authentically rather than like meeting each other's sort of polished personas that aren't
Mhm.
all that accurate.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of clients who have come out of a faith system where maybe they got married super young, or they
Mhm.
were taught these uh, I kiss dating goodbye ideas about courtship, and now they
Mhm.
are in their 30s and they've never really dated. And the thing I see over and over and over again is this desire to like, how do I impress them? How do I get the phone number? How do I get the second date? Without
Mhm.
ever actually stopping to ask, like, do I want a second date? Like, am I even
Yeah.
having fun? When we're trying so hard to like keep up appearances in that way rather than
Mhm.
just sort of accepting ourselves as we are, we
Mm.
forget to ask whether or not we even want to be there.
I love that's such a great point because truly what we're doing is saying, am I lovable? So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Am I the
stop and ask
type of person
questions.
that can be loved?
Yeah, so it wouldn't serve us to really pause and think, are they what I want? How do I feel
Mm,
about this? It's like, well, if my priority is to fill this deep void inside, because when I look at myself, I don't really believe I'm lovable, then of course we're going to do whatever to try and just get that love. And so we're going to forget that we're a person who's allowed to actually have our own standards or interests or wants, or like that
yeah.
goes out the window because we're like, well, step number one, someone tell me I'm lovable. Dear God, someone tell me I'm lovable.
That's
Because I'm
the only thing
terrified
that
that I'm
I'm
not.
looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, so then obviously, right, with the self-compassion, it's like when you look at yourself, you're like, oh, of course you are. Not
Mm.
because I'm looking at the pros and cons list of who you are and there's enough pros, so okay, cool, you're lovable. It's like, no, you are. You're a human being in this world and deserving of it because you exist. So you're lovable. So once that's already secured, it is just so much easier to be healthy in a relationship, to yeah, date and actually be like, what do I think of this person? Versus that desperate need we all have of like the checkbox of someone make me feel safe. It's like, oh, if we can help ourselves feel safe, how much freer we can be in so many other facets of our life.
Mm. Yeah, well, then, how do these ideas around shame and self compassion and everything else change our relationships with like our bodies or our sexuality?
Yeah, body, sexuality, right? Always such a that's a tough one with self-compassion, so important, and
So much shame there, right? Yeah,
it's
there's
so
so many
hard. It's just
opportunities to beat yourself up or tell yourself that you're
yeah.
wrong. And if I just am the right sexual person or the right sexual orientation or I have the
Mhm.
right kinks or interests, then maybe I'll be loved.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just ooh, shame, love, sex, just a hotbed there. But yeah, I think one thing too is like normalizing the fact that you don't have to like love yourself. That sounds really contradictory, but I feel that there could be this emphasis on like if I look in the mirror or something and I point out some flaw in myself, that we can be quick to beat ourselves up for like, you're supposed to love yourself. You're supposed to look in the mirror and be like, no, I love all of that. And it's like, but we're
I'm good enough,
also
I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
exactly. But it's okay and it's totally normal for us to see flaws within ourselves. I'm not saying there actually are flaws, but we're tribal people. We're supposed to be looking around and being like, what's acceptable, it's not acceptable. I've got to make sure I still belong, I still fit. So we're wired to do that. So I think people need to be really gentle and compassionate with the part of themselves that initially does notice anything that seems atypical and label it a flaw. It's
Mm,
like, well, that's just you like trying to survive in the tribe, right? If my tribe, everyone looks a very specific way and I look different, that could affect my survival. So of course we're gonna have that comparison and kind of scan ourselves for like, is there something wrong with me that's gonna make me not belong? So even having compassion for like, oh, that's the part of you that's being well. That's not the part of you that hates yourself. Don't let any of that like self critique make you automatically assume then, oh, you must hate yourself. It's like, no, you're a tribal person. So this is what we do. But then being able to look at it as like, oh, I'm only labeling that a flaw because of what society is telling me, because of these
mhm.
stories. This is actually perfectly fine as it is. This is who I am in this moment. This is what it is. This, whatever my body looks like, whatever my body is feeling like in any given moment, however it's responding or not responding in different ways. It's like, okay, this is my body doing its best to be as well as it can be in this moment right now. And so trying to have love for that part of you that's like working so hard, even the parts that we're quick to label like, well, that's the dysfunctional part of my body or
That's the
whatever.
part
It's
that's
like,
broken.
yeah, it's like, oh, that's the part that is working so hard, like it is working so, so hard to be okay and to be well and to help you thrive. And it's okay to be frustrated sometimes with things, but that doesn't mean, yeah, there's your broken part, there's your unlovable part. And honestly, it's the way we treat those things that we deem like, our broken selves, like that's what ends up interfering most with intimacy. It's not actually the thing. whatever it
Mhm.
is, right?
How
It's
we
the way,
feel about the thing.
yeah, it's how we're interacting with it. If it's like, say someone can, you know, you can only come in one position, but you've got this story in your head of like, well, but that's not normal people. It can be different. And so you
Mhm.
respond to that story by saying, well, then I'll just keep acting like normal people act. And, or I'll just fake it and pretend, or I'll, oh God, it's horrible. It'll be so shameful if I share that. Like all this stuff, it's like, that's the stuff that's making you now feel disconnected from a partner. It's not actually the thing, you know? It's like,
Mm.
so if you have that care for yourself and you don't see it as like, oh yeah, remember that's the broken part of you. You're like, oh, that's my body's response right now. Got it. Thank you, body, for giving me that information. What would support me in this moment? Maybe it's talking to my partner about something, or changing position, or saying, I think I'd like to just stop for now. Like you're allowed to ask those questions of yourself of what do I need? Because you're coming from that place of I'm not broken. This is what's going on right now. What would be the most supportive thing for this experience? So the thing, yeah, that we demonize so much within ourselves, like it really isn't the culprit as much as we keep trying to think that it is.
Yeah, I really love that model. I've always kind of believed that, probably 10% of our problems can be dealt with by dealing with them, and
Mm.
a full on like another 80 or 90% of our problems are because we are trying to fix the other 10% that can't be fixed or that can't be
Mhm.
like dealt with. And we just need to find a little bit of acceptance because 80% of our stress is just resistance to things that we could probably cope with if we just gave ourselves
Mhm.
permission to like work around them.
Yeah, exactly. And like thinking of that example too, if it's in a sexual situation, like that someone could walk away from that if it's, say it's like, oh, they can't orgasm unless something's very specific way. Like say they don't express that to a partner or partners and they're just like fighting the experience or just keeping it private and feeling shitty or whatever. And then the sexual experience ends. They walk away from that, reinforcing this idea of it's the fact that I'm particular in this way that is what led to that being an uncomfortable experience yet again.
Mm,
And then the
hmm.
next time they keep going with that and they keep believing, ah, see, the thing that was stressing me out, it is bad because look, it's taking over. Now it's all I can think about. And it's like clearly my dysfunction. When it's like, oh, but what if it is the way you related to it? What if you embrace that and realize, oh, this is my body doing what my body does? Cool. Thanks, body, for letting me know what's up. Okay. Like it just gets to play out so differently because you're not moralizing all these different little things about yourself or about an interaction. So I think it's just so easy for us to start believing these stories because we don't actually stop to think, oh, maybe I'm actually the one making it worse. We keep
Mm.
thinking, oh, it's my body, it's my sexual organs, it's my sexuality, and it's this, it's that. It's like maybe those things are actually fine, you know. Maybe you're just not respecting them in the way that they're desperately begging you to respect them.
Yeah, so you're saying it's human to have these types of judgments,
Hmm.
but to relate to them like mindfully and compassionately is to
Yeah.
kind of ask ourselves like, well, what does this judgment mean? Is it useful? Should I
Hmm.
be that critical? Or if there is a concern, like, can I do something about it rather than like punishing myself for it or
Hmm.
overly evaluating and measuring it?
Yeah, exactly. Because if we're punishing ourselves from it, we are then disconnected from ourselves and from anyone else in our lives. Like
Mm,
punishment has never led to greater connection ever. Ever, right? I mean, I I would love an example where, someone got to be closer because of a punishment that they endured, and so, yeah, it is this, like, full acceptance of, and especially if it's with sex or bodies, of, like, whatever is here, and there's space for it, and it is perfectly right because it is showing up, like, it's it's here, and so I will allow it. Your permission to be here. It's not a, is this one allowed? Well, I didn't want this part to be here. I really wish it was this part. So da, da, da. It's like, no, no, anything that shows up or doesn't show up gets to be totally fair and how the moment was supposed to be,
mm.
instead of just like finding every little thing of like, oh, well, that's where that moment went wrong. And that's where my body went wrong again. And that it's just like, oh, no, that's what your body did. And then that's what your body did. And okay, okay, now let's follow it along. What does your body want and need? And you just keep going off of that. What is helpful, like you're saying, It's using the like workability strategy instead of the very punitive moral, like who's good or bad in the situation.
Yeah, it's utilitarian in that way, which I really
Mhm.
appreciate.